We're joined now by Christine's son, Seymour Platt. Seymour, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Our absolute
Lovely
pleasure.
to see you.
First and foremost, let's ask you about the drama.
Yes.
Are you pleased with it? Does it feel like it's a fair representation of the mum that you knew?
Well, I've only seen 2 episodes, so the BBC have been a little bit reluctant to show me the entire thing. I completely understand why that is, because I'd be a loose cannon for them. You know, I'm the son, and you know, it's how I would take it. But certainly the 2 episodes, I've liked the second episode much more. I think that it's fair. I think the actress is really good.
Yeah.
Cookson's really good at playing my mum, and there are times I've seen my mum in her.
Really?
Yeah.
Which is an accolade for her. But I wonder as well, though, more importantly, Seymour, are we getting a sense... I mean, obviously, this is a mum that was only 19 at the time.
Yes.
Are we getting a sense of the mum that you knew rather than the mum that we have read about and know from the stories?
My mum was even naive when I knew her. And I was born 10 years after these events. I haven't got a massive amount that I can talk about these events that are in the drama. But the woman I knew, well, she was a devoted mum. She had a really hard life. But I know that my house was filled with love.
Which is great. I mean, because Christine Keeler is one of those names, isn't it? Even if people don't really understand what happened, what went on, born after that period, don't understand how dramatic it was for the government at the time.
Yeah.
It's one of those names, and that famous photo of her sitting astride the chair, which has been recreated on the cover of so many magazines since. Although she maintained she was fully clothed. Well, she had pants on.
She did. She had knickers on. Yeah.
There you go, keeping her modesty there. But that must be strange when you think of that as your mum. Did she block it out when you were growing up? Because there must have been people that talked about it. Were you aware of what had happened before? Yeah, so at the time I became really aware was obviously when the film Scandal came out. I think the size of that was just blew me away. We went to the premiere for Scandal, and back in the 80s, it was a who's who of 80s stars, and we sat down and we watched the film, and it really hit home. Like, Bob Geldof was sitting next to my mum with Paula Yates, and I went to the loo halfway through the film, nervous, and as I went down, I slipped down all of these stairs, and I landed on my backside, and I looked up, and Phil Collins was standing there, and he said, "You all right?" And it was just... And it really did hit home that this was special, this was big. Yeah. Yeah, amazing.
She sounds like quite a character as well.
Yes.
I mean, from sort of the forward that I've read of yours, you talk about sort of she was a bit bonkers. She loved driving. She loved driving really fast. Yeah. She was a little bit eccentric, a little bit batty, but and very funny. She was.
Oh, she was. We would laugh so much. You know, when you casually mention to somebody something silly, I said to her once, "Do you know that when you're asleep, apparently, in your lifetime, 8 spiders will walk in and out of your mouth when you're asleep, if you sleep with your mouth open?" I thought nothing of it. And then, about a year later, she wasn't very well, and I took her a cup of tea, and she was in bed, and she got a scarf, and she was putting it all round her mouth to get to sleep. And I went, "What are you doing, Mum? What are you doing?" She said, "I don't want the spiders to get in my mouth when I'm asleep." So, yeah, she was. God bless her, you know.
She was fun and games for you growing up.
She was, yeah.
But she kept a lot of these secrets as well from you.
She did.
She didn't like to talk about it, or she wouldn't talk about it with you. Did you ever ask her?
I did. One of the things that I asked her about was the entire story around Lucky Gordon, because it's one of the hardest parts of my mum's story to understand.
So just for people to know, this was a previous relationship she had with Lucky Gordon, and she was very scared of him.
It was a confused relationship.
He kind of followed her and stalked her, you might say, in modern terms, wouldn't you?
Yes.
And then he attacked her.
He did.
And it was testimony around what happened with that attack and whether the witnesses that were or weren't there that led to her going
to prison for perjury.
Yeah.
A lot of people, when I was growing up, knew my mum went to prison, and they thought that she went to prison because she was a prostitute, and that's not the case. Or it was because of the Stephen Ward trial, and that wasn't the case. She went to prison because of an earlier case, weeks before.
But it was connected, though, wasn't it, do you think?
It was connected in that my mother's testimony about being attacked by Lucky Gordon in the street was correct. There were 2 witnesses to that attack. It's disputed whether they were still coming down the stairs from the flat above or they were actually there. But the testimony, they were West Indian, they said, please don't tell the police that we were here. It was 1963, and it was a different world, and it was a different police force.
Yeah.
There's a lot of conjecture that the police probably knew they were there. They certainly knew by the time it went to trial. And in 1963, the police would prosecute people. So she didn't have a barrister, she didn't have counsel. The only people she spoke to were the police.
So she ended up leaving out the fact the witnesses were there.
She did.
Which then meant, in the later trial of Stephen Ward that was so critical for the government, she looked like she was a convicted perjurer, so she was therefore much harder to believe.
Yes. Trouble with perjury is it hung over my mum all of her life. It would be, I would imagine, the biggest regret that she had if she was a perjurer, because everything she said was a lie. And it means that people can call her a liar about silly things, even whether or not she had sex with Eugene Ivanov. She said she had sex, he said they had sex, they had time to have sex, and yet people still say they probably didn't have sex because she's a perjurer. What's it matter?
So it just undermines her character in the court of public opinion. She was a controversial character, and it seemed like she was quite feisty.
She was.
And antagonistic at times.
100%.
What would you like her legacy to be, Seymour?
My mother was probably the most honest person I've ever met in my life. To my detriment, she was the most honest. She would tell you terrible secrets to anybody, particularly if they weren't hers.
Right, OK.
I would like people to remember her more fondly and to appreciate that she was a woman of her time, and it was a different time.
What was the cost that she ended up having to pay for this whole scandal, for the fact that she was involved in this affair and you know, her profile was so huge for a period?
My mother went from poverty to riches to abject poverty again. We grew up very poor. And she really lived her life like that. There wasn't a lot of opportunity for her.
Did she feel doors were closed because of the scandal?
Yeah, doors were closed.
Well, look, I mean, hopefully you can sort of you will with your book here. This is the book, The Secrets and Lies, which is the Trials of Christine Keeler, which is out. And, of course, the series, which is on the BBC at the moment.
Thank you.
And the story is really gripping, as it is. But there's that picture. Is that picture?
Yes, that is.
It's
iconic.
so iconic, absolutely. Seymour, thanks for coming in.
Thank you, guys.
Really nice to meet you.
You're very kind. Thank you.
Thank you.